My name is Robert LaMarche. I'm the Executive Director and Attorney for ACF Adoptions, Advocates for Children and Families. We are a private nonprofit adoption agency licensed here in the state of Florida, and also in Georgia. I am also the adopted parent of 3 kiddos, so in addition to this being my career, adoption really is in my heart. So I want to spend a little time today walking you through our process. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance you've already sent in your preliminary application and have expressed an interest in working with us. And I want to take the next little bit of time to explain to you sort of what your life is going to look like working with ACF in the coming months, okay? And I find that the best way to do that is really to take you through what I will call a nice clean case. So we're going to start at the beginning with a fictional expectant mom, and we're going to take her through the process, you and her together through the match process, onward to baby being born, hopefully consents being signed, placement, and then the finality of the legal process. So, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk about some of the things that can go wrong and how we might handle those issues, okay? There's going to be a section that is going to be very specific about the legal issues as it relates to fathers. So I find it best to just handle that piece by itself. So if you think I'm glossing over the legal issues as it relates to the dads, I'm not. We're going to come back to it, okay? So let's start at the beginning. How do we come to know these expectant moms? A good number of them are referred to us by hospitals, maternal clinics, other providers that we have worked with and built relationships with over the years. Other women that have placed with us will sometimes refer women they know who need our services to us. And of course, we rely on the internet for some advertising campaigns that put our services out there. Most of our moms are in Florida, though because we've been licensed in Georgia for a little over a year now, we do sometimes are getting increasingly more calls from Georgia moms. The processes there are slightly different. I'll cover that a little bit later. People often ask who these women are demographically, and while there certainly is no one type of woman who is reaching out to make adoption plans, what we have found is we're generally talking about women in their early to mid-20s to about their mid-30s. Often these are women who are parenting other children already and are feeling a lack of support in their family, friendship circles, women who are barely getting by and feeling like one more child coming into that family equation is going to sink the ship. There's lack of resources. We also have women who are struggling to maintain their sobriety. They might be on Subutex or methadone maintenance for past opiate addictions. We might be talking about women who have mental health issues and recognize that it takes all of their strength to keep healthy and moving forward, and that they simply are not in a position to parent a child. Unfortunately, we have situations where a child may have been conceived because of a sexual assault, and that may be a child that this parent just feels that they're not prepared to parent. And also, we see cases where a child will be diagnosed with a genetic condition or some sort of medical complexity that maybe this birth mother or this family has decided they don't feel prepared to parent and have decided to make an adoption plan. So there's a wide variety of what brings folks to us. We don't question people's motivations. Our job really is to make sure that people are informed of their options, to make sure that they've explored the supports that are out in the community should they decide to parent, but also then to help them make an adoption plan, put all the ducks in a row rather, so that if they decide that this is the right thing to do, that there's a good supportive plan in place. That's where we come in. So typically a call would come in, an inquiry would come in, somebody would respond, do an initial intake. If the expectant or birth parent is then ready to meet with a social worker, one of our social workers will meet her at her home or in the community or invite her into the office to get to know one another, to talk about our services, to start gathering background information, discussing her motivation for making an adoption plan, speaking to her about her wishes in terms of what kind of family would she like to have adopt this baby, what kind of relationship is she looking to have with that family moving forward, and having her sign documents that we need certain disclosures, releases of information so that we can gather her medical, prenatals, and that sort of thing. We typically don't start working with someone in earnest until they're in their second trimester, have been able to provide us with verifiable proof of pregnancy, and are cooperating with us around naming or providing the information about the alleged father of the child. Okay, so it would be very unusual for any of you to be hearing about a case prior to the second trimester. And if you can imagine, even if we meet her right at the beginning of that second trimester, some number of weeks, perhaps a month or more, are going to pass before we do all this work with her and have a good understanding and assessment of the case before we'd be looking to match. Okay, so assuming that we get all that information together and she is feeling that she wants to move forward with this process, we're then going to be looking to make a match. We're going to have asked her about her preferences with a family, as you will experience, and as you saw a little bit in your preliminary application process. That's information we're gathering from you as well. And when the time comes, we are going to present her with families' profiles that meet her preferences, that we know are also families who are open to adopting her child. So you're going to have the opportunity to know some information about her and the situation, and will be asked, hey, is this a situation you'd like to be considered for? If the answer is yes, your profile will be submitted, she'll have an opportunity to review, and she selects the family that she feels most connected with. Sometimes it's based just on that profile. Sometimes she narrows it down to one or two families that she feels might be a good connection. And if that's the case, she may have more questions. Sometimes she wants to do a Zoom. And those are all things that you're going to have to explore with us around your comfort level to do those kinds of things, okay? But let's say that birth mom, and we're gonna use the name Tiffany, birth mom Tiffany, has selected your family. You've previously said, oh, this situation sounds great for you, so what an exciting call we get to make. We'll let you know, Tiffany has selected your family. We now have a prospective match. What's going to happen next? Flurry of paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork in this process. This is exciting paperwork to be doing. So at that point, there's certain paperwork that's going to come to you. They're called the prospective match documents. Remember, it is prospective because she can't sign anything now that commits her to anything. This is us putting a plan in place. During that process, there's going to be a discussion about, do you want to speak with her directly? Is that something she wanted to do? Is it a Zoom call? Are people geographically, convenient enough that they want to get together? Is that something that we're going to facilitate? Is it something that people want to be doing on their own? Generally, I recommend first face-to-face, that one of us is there, but as the circumstances dictate, it might be different. So let's assume paperwork is done, the match piece happens. I'm going to talk money separately because I think it can get complicated as I go through the story, but don't worry, I'm very comfortable talking about money. I'll do that again. I'll come back to that in a bit. So certain monies are going to be due at the time of the match and along with that paperwork. Assuming everybody's matched, we start marching then towards the due date. So we're going to be helping facilitate this relationship between you and the expectant mother, the birth father, if he's involved. We're going to be communicating with the hospital or wherever she's getting her prenatal care. And as we get those updated records, those will be records that will be shared with you. You might be developing your relationship with her directly and just kind of keeping us apprised of how that's going. Any of her needs around financial support, any of her needs around counseling, those are things that we will be taking care of. You will just be really working on building your relationship. As it gets close to time to deliver, we're going to be communicating with the hospital, providing them with Tiffany's birth plan, where she's going to lay out who the intended adoptive parents are, what kind of contact she wants for them to have with the baby in the hospital, if any, what kind of contact she wants to have in the hospital with the baby, if any. We're going to submit that information to the hospital along with HIPAA release forms, and 8 out of 10 times it goes pretty smoothly. Hospitals have their own internal processes. One of the things I've learned is that nobody on the weekend has ever talked to anybody during the week at a hospital. So if we've made arrangements with somebody on a Friday about a birth and delivery plan, we will have to find the new person on Saturday because there's no way that information has been communicated to them. So sometimes you just have to roll with us. It can get a little hairy at the time of labor and delivery, depending on the hospital, the timing, and that sort of thing. We are not typically at the hospital with birth mom. It is not our approach that we're sitting on her bed waiting for her to deliver this baby. If she wants the support of her social worker being there with her, that's certainly something that can happen. But she is typically in the hospital with her support person, her family, or her friend, the birth father, whoever she has chosen. We do not insert ourselves into that intimate space unless we are asked to be there. You may very well be at the hospital. Sometimes birth mothers want the intended adoptive parents to be present for labor and delivery. Or sometimes you're just in the hospital and she wants you to have access to the baby afterwards. What's important to remember about that is, regardless of this, you are a guest of the birth mother, and that plan that was submitted to the hospital is her plan, which means she can change the plan. So if she originally wasn't planning to see her hold the baby, but has since decided to see her hold the baby, that's her right. If she originally wasn't going to have you come into the room, but has decided to have you in the room, that is her right. We don't have control over that. And changes in that plan are not necessarily red flags. So during mom's stay in the hospital, we're going to be in close communication with her about her adoption plan. Is this moving forward? Is she having second thoughts? Is she, what's going on in her brain? How is she feeling about moving forward? If there's bad news, we're going to let you know that as soon as we know it. Typically, if we're at the hospital, you're there, things are generally a green light. Things are generally moving forward. And we'll continue to keep you apprised. Behind the scenes, we're going to be doing a lot of things. By then, she will most likely have spoken to her attorney already. As I said to you, I'm the attorney for the agency, so I don't represent the birth moms that we work with, but we want to make sure they all have representation. So we hire independent attorneys who are adoption competent folks who will represent these birth moms in the process. So they will be reviewing with them their consent documents in advance so that they understand the consequences of the documents that they're signing. And when the time comes to actually sign those consent documents, 9 out of 10 times, those attorneys will appear via Zoom to be present for that process. So while mom is in the hospital, baby is born, perhaps you're visiting, caring for baby, or visiting with birth mom, depending on whatever the birth plan was, we are going to be getting things in order. In the state of Florida, you can't sign the adoption consent until baby is 48 hours old or mom has been medically cleared for discharge. She's a young, healthy woman. 34 hours, 36 hours have passed. The hospital has entered that medical discharge. We can do consents thereafter. In the state of Georgia, you can sign anytime after 24 hours. Typically, however, just from a best practice standpoint, ACF would wait until 48 hours before taking consent or surrenders from a mom in Georgia. All right. But mom is in hospital. What do we have that we have to arrange? Well, we like to have a court reporter present. We like to have the attorney appear by Zoom. In Florida, we need to have 2 witnesses and a notary. And in most cases, I'm the person who's traveling to do those consents in person at the hospital. So that's quite a bit of people to coordinate. In Georgia, it's a fewer people, but again, lots of people that need to be coordinated to make that happen. So sometimes folks feel like it's a little bit frenetic, but it is just by the nature of we can't make anything happen until after the baby's born and mom has given us a green light that she in fact wants to move forward with signing these documents. All right, so flurry of activity. You're in a very difficult emotional situation. You've perhaps met this baby, fallen in love. You're supporting this birth mom who you think is an angel, and you're also recognizing that she could still decide not to move forward. But this is a nice clean case. So what happens here? Mom signs the documents. And we notify you. You might be in the hospital, but you're not going to be present in the room when mom signs that, and dad, if he's part of the process, it would not be appropriate. So what does this mean, she signed? What it means now is that ACF, our agency, has become the legal guardian of that baby, okay? So we are now responsible for that child. In Florida, those consents are valid upon execution, all right? It's happening just like that. If a child is under 6 months of age, there's no revocation. The only opportunity that a mom or dad could have to try to invalidate their consent is if they could prove that there was fraud or duress in the taking of the consent. I can assure you, represented by her own attorney, 2 witnesses, a court reporter, and I'm the person handling the case, that's not going to happen, okay? It is very rare for us to have contested or litigated cases. I'm risk adverse. We take a lot of time on the front end to make sure that we handle these cases appropriately. In Georgia, there is a 4-day revocation period for any reason. That revocation period starts the day after mom signs, and the 4th day cannot land on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday. All right, so we have to do a little bit of, calendar work when it comes time to when that revocation period would end in Georgia. But once that revocation period ends, it's done. There's no opportunity to try to invalidate the consents. So depending on the scenario, you're talking about the Florida consents, no revocation, or Georgia, a 4-day revocation period. So documents are signed, nice clean case, baby's ready to be discharged. What's going to happen? Our social worker is going to make sure that birth mom is discharged and gets home safely, takes her to the pharmacy, anything that she might need to make her comfortable moving forward. We're going to continue to be checking on her, seeing if we can support her. We're going to connect her with our post-adoption services. We have a woman who is a birth parent herself who runs a support group online several times a week to offer support and make connections for these women. And they also have counseling available to them at any time. If she wants to have her own therapist 6 weeks after she gives birth, 6 months after she gives birth, or 6 years after she gives birth, all she has to do is contact us and we're going to set her up. We have a network of adoption competent therapists who are going to do that. So we're going to be working with her on aftercare, okay? Swinging back to you, what's going to happen? All right, baby's ready to be discharged. Well, we're going to sit down, oftentimes it'll be me, and what we're going to do is review some documents, more documents, and these are your placement documents. These are the really exciting documents because these are the documents that are saying the child is coming into your care and custody, that the agency is giving you certain rights and responsibilities to our baby. You can have them in your physical custody, you can feed them, you can travel with them, you can make medical decisions on their behalf, and then you have the right to have this child with you, okay? We are typically present for discharge because in the eyes of the hospital, this is my baby, even though the baby is going home with you, okay? So you're going to have those documents. We're going to be discharged from the hospital. Very exciting. You're going to be so excited. You're going to go home, but not yet, right? The next part of the process is ICPC if this is an out-of-state placement. So if you live in Florida and you adopt from Florida, no ICPC. If you live in Georgia and you adopt from Georgia, no ICPC. If you're adopting from a different state than where you live, ICPC is involved. Essentially, what we've committed to do is we are going to pull your ICPC packet together and we're going to have it submitted to the appropriate ICPC office in the state within 48 hours of the child being discharged. We typically do better than that, but we commit to 48 hours. Various states say they have a varying amount of time to review those documents. Often states will say they have 5 to 7 days to review before sending them to the receiving state. The receiving state is where you live, okay? The initial packet goes to the state where the baby is, where the agency is licensed, and then goes to the home state. We advise people it could take up to 2 weeks before you receive that approval to return home. And legally you cannot return home until you have that approval. It's rare that it takes 2 weeks, but from a life planning perspective, people need to sort of be thinking about that 2-week mark. So is it ideal to be parenting your brand new baby for the first 2 weeks in a hotel somewhere or an Airbnb? It's not, but it is what it is. We have to follow the law. Once you get home, once you get your approval and you get home, we're going to be contacting your home study agency to say, okay, post-placement period, time to begin. The family needs to be seen at least once a month. Those reports need to come back to me, and we're going to use those reports ultimately when we file your adoption petition, okay? We're going to do that work in-house. We're going to prepare those documents. You'll have an opportunity to review them. We're going to file them with the appropriate court. We're going to get a court date eventually, and it is typically around the 5-month mark that we're going in to finalize the adoption, okay? It can vary a little bit, but it's typically around that 5-month mark. At this point, whether it's Georgia or Florida, those final hearings are happening via Zoom. If a judge requires an in-person hearing, we can't fight the judge. We'll make it happen. You'll have to come. But assuming things continue the way they have been, it'll be a Zoom hearing. You'll have the link in advance. You can share it with friends and family. So you're going to have a whole host of people join on that special day, okay? Depending on the court, I might be a person on the Zoom. I'm not licensed to practice in Georgia, so we have a Georgia attorney who would be handling the cases there. But that's something that we'd be closely coordinating. Once the hearing happens, we will be getting the documents that we need, the certified copies. We'll be requesting the amended birth certificates. And once all that information is back in our hands, we will forward it to you along with instructions on next steps, meaning how to get Social Security set up if that's not something that's happened during the process already. And you'll have copies of the new birth certificate and the certified, the final judgments for adoption, okay? And at that point, we're out of your life. You've assumed all of the responsibility for this child, and your adoption is complete. All right, I want to talk a little bit about what happens when things go wrong. And I think this really falls into a couple of categories. One being new information, and two being mom having second thoughts. Let's talk about new information. So you came into a case based on the information we were able to provide from our meetings with mom and early prenatal records. So let's say as we're moving through this case, we learned something new. Let's say there's a new medical diagnosis for this child. Maybe there's complications with the pregnancy. Maybe we discover that mom is using a substance that we weren't previously aware of. You know, those are all things that can change the complexion of the case. Maybe there's new legal complications because the father has popped up or expressed interest in this child. The reality is you're not obligated to adopt this particular child, right? If the complexion of the case changes such that you no longer feel like you can be in this case, it's the right case for you, that's fine. You're going to communicate that information to us. We will talk to the birth mother, the expectant mom. She will have the option of selecting another family. You will be refunded any of the funds that you forwarded on this case, and the next family will be responsible for the case moving forward. So this is one of the reasons that the communication is going to be really important. And if you're feeling uncomfortable in a case, I'm not going to be able to answer every question that you have. We're not going to make every case perfect for you. You're never going to have as much information as you want. But if there's a significant shift in this case in your comfort level, you're not obligated, okay? The second thing is, and the really bad thing that people worry about is expectant moms changing their mind. In the sort of scale of things, the worst time for that to happen is for it to happen when you're sitting at the hospital having met the baby. That is terrible. And there's no sugarcoating that. Is a tremendous loss, and it is a trauma. Fortunately, it's very rare that we get to that point before a mom makes it known that she's not going forward with an adoption plan. Typically, we might start seeing some red flags as we're closing in on that delivery date. That would be information we'd be sharing with you as soon as we have it. And if she does make that decision, or we learn information such as she delivered 2 days ago and hasn't let us know, that's information we're going to get to you as soon as we have it. All right? A couple things about that, percentage-wise. It varies from year to year. At present, right now, it is October, oh my God, I don't even know, 16th, 18th, It is October 19th, 2023. We have had 30 successful placements so far this year, 6 failed matches. 2 of those failed matches happened just last week. So that gives you an idea of sort of the percentages of matches that have gone to placement versus matches that have fallen apart. Of those 6 families, 3 of those families have already been placed with children from ACF. One of those families has decided not to pursue adoption, and the 2 families from last week obviously have yet to be placed. What happens in these circumstances moving forward? Well, oftentimes families need a minute. They need to take a break, they need to absorb what has happened, they need to grieve, and that's certainly a part of the process. We want to be a part of that process if you'll have us to be part of that process, but we can also respect your time and space that you need. We will want to have a follow-up conversation about next steps if and when you are ready to move forward with another opportunity. What we try to do for families who have failed matches or have had very difficult situations is that the next time that we have the opportunity to make the decision ourselves, because maybe we have a safe haven placement or we have a last minute case where the expectant parents or birth parents have asked us to select the family, if all things are appropriate, meaning that you would be appropriate for this child and this child would be appropriate for your family, we would go to you first. We would go to those families who've had those failed matches and have had those difficult set of circumstances, because those cases are generally a reduced risk because of the time frame, and they're generally less expensive because of the compressed amount of time that we can provide financial assistance to a birth mother. Okay, so that's how we would handle those kind of situations. I want to talk a little bit about legal issues as it relates to fathers, and I want to talk about money. Legal issues as it relates to fathers. We are responsible for following up on men that are disclosed to us by the expectant moms, okay? And that's something that we're very diligent about. Again, we find that if we do a good job on the front end, reaching out and trying to communicate with these gentlemen, that we're going to have a lot less issues down the road. In Florida or Georgia, a birth mother has the right to privacy and does not have to name the father of the baby. However, we generally encourage, if this is a person who's known to her, that she disclose that information, one, so that we can invite them to participate, two, that we can gather any of their social medical information that might be useful for the baby, and 3, because I do ultimately feel like it makes the case tighter legally. So we do our assessment as to the best way to connect with this father. We might do a diligent search and try to locate him. Once located, we might invite him to participate in the process. If he's not interested in participating in the process or having this child adopted, there are different avenues we have to take depending on whether this is a Florida or a Georgia case. In Florida, he might be served with a notice of intended adoption plan that gives him 30 days to respond to the court and to the agency and to take certain steps to preserve any rights he might have to the child. In Georgia, we might reach out to him, and if he's on board, have him sign a surrender. That can be done pretty much at any time, even before the birth of the child in the state of Georgia. There are publications that may have to happen in the state of Georgia. If this is somebody that is married to the mother, we might have to serve them with a termination of parental right, the notice of the hearing. So it varies depending on the state and the complexion of the case. But when you receive a prospective match, one of the things that you're going to receive is called a child study. And in addition to the social, medical, family history information in that narrative report, there's going to be a little section about the legal issues in the case, meaning what is the situation with the alleged father? What steps are we taking to engage him? or to handle the legal issues as it relates to the father. So that can be part of your calculation as to whether or not this is the right case for you. And of course, it's not uncommon for me to have follow-up conversations with folks just so they're really clear on what the legal issues on the case and how it is that we intend to proceed. But it is something that we take very, very seriously. I do most of that reaching out to the alleged fathers myself. And then handle them as is appropriate. We do have increasingly more and more dads seem to be engaging in the process and cooperating with the birth moms in the selection of the family, sometimes being present, and also in having an ongoing open or semi-open adoption relationship with the birth family. I want to talk a little bit about money, and I want to talk a little bit about openness. So most of our adoptions are what I would say semi-open. That is, the expectant parent, the birth parent, has selected the adoptive family. They're in some level of communication. They've shared some personal information with one another. They're often meeting at the hospital, spending time together. And there's an agreement that moving forward, the adoptive family is going to be providing pictures, letters, videos, updates at regularly scheduled intervals. Typically that happens through a portal that we use online that everybody is secure and everybody can log in and exchange that information, but sometimes it happens directly. Sometimes expectant or birth parents are in direct contact with adoptive families and do FaceTime, Skype, Zooms. Sometimes the post-adoption communication agreement calls for an annual visit. And the terms around that are that those happen at a mutually agreed upon time and space, and that as long as they continue to be in the child's best interest, that those should continue. In Florida, those post-adoption communication agreements are referenced in the final judgment of adoption, but they're not enforceable in the way that they are in Georgia. In Georgia, there's a official post-adoption communication agreement that the court recognizes and can enforce. In either case, if there's a failure to send pictures or letters, or someone misses a visit because of good intentions or not, it can't undo the adoption. You're not at risk of undoing the adoption, but you certainly shouldn't be making a commitment to a birth parent for openness and exchange of information that you're not prepared to follow through with. These updates, these pictures really go a long way in reinforcing to birth parents that the child is having the life that they made the sacrifice for, right? I speak to them often and say, don't deny yourself the opportunity to see the child thriving. Don't deny yourself the opportunity to see that what you wanted for them has come to fruition. And if on the other end you're not doing, following up, if you're not holding up to your end of the bargain, they don't have that reassurance, and that can lead to a lot of doubt, regret, and grief. And we don't want to be a part of causing more of that for people who've already made such a very difficult decision. All right, let's talk about money. Private adoption is not inexpensive. You're going to go on to our website, and when you first looked, about coming onto the agency, you saw our fee sheet is there. If you've already sent in a preliminary application, you've also signed a document that lays out our fees. When you are presented with a specific case, you are going to get a cost estimate that I've done that is tailored to your case. It's going to be broken down in the same categories as the sample of fees that you saw, okay? The area that really varies is the living expenses of the birth parent. As you can imagine, if someone starts working with us when she's 16 or 17 weeks pregnant and she was homeless at the time, and we have to put her into housing and we're providing for all of her food, clothing, we had to buy her a bed because the place she moved into had nothing, and we're going to be supporting her for the duration of her pregnancy up to 6 weeks post-birth, 8 weeks with a C-section in Georgia. You can imagine that cost of that case would be significantly more than if we get a call from a hospital that a mom has delivered. In those circumstances, we're able to provide financial assistance, 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the state and the circumstances. And as you can imagine, those expenses are going to be greatly compressed, less just because of the compressed amount of time that we can provide services. So one of the things that you might decide when you're presented with a case as to whether it's a case that is right for you or not is the cost of the case and the potential financial risk. Because what happens? Well, you're going to see that $10,000 of our agency fee is due at match and it's non-refundable. Okay? That is for the work that we're doing on a case for months and months and months in many cases. All right, working with the expectant mom, her social worker, dealing with the birth father, in many cases having that issue resolved already, coordinating with the hospital, coordinating with prenatal care, getting these records, transporting mom to her appointments, managing her finances, supporting her, being available to her 24/7. That is the money that is for our services. The other money that you're going to have paid at the time of match is a cost deposit, and that's going to be money to cover her expenses and other costs that we have associated with the case. Filing fees, the private investigator, court filing fees, things like that. Now, if the case falls apart, we do an accounting. We have down to the penny everything that we've spent on a case, down to the penny everything she spent on the case. We're going to look at what is remaining in that cost deposit, and we're going to refund you the difference. Money that's spent is money that's gone. I'm not going to be able to recoup that from anyone, and so that becomes your financial risk. So anything that we've collected that wasn't spent will be returned to you. The accounting then gets closed on that case, and the next case we start as a clean case. We don't roll funds over. We don't hold on to your money. You're not obligated to stay with us. We don't owe you a baby. We're in a situation where we've provided services. We've been compensated for those services, and the next case would start clean. The monies that you would have paid, your application, your enrollment fee, those monies are safe. You never pay